probably nobody knows everything in terms of the best caliber, what's the most, well, we know something about effective, calibers and that kind of thing, but best caliber, this one's better than that one and all that sort of thing. Better gun, better caliber. A lot of it is so subjective. You're prowling around the YouTube or the forums and you're seeing all these comments about, oh, I wouldn't carry a 380, or you need a 44, or you need a 45, or you need a 357 SIG. That's the ultimate caliber, or 10 millimeter, or you've got a 10 millimeter, but you're carrying weak ammo in it. You got the wrong ammo, and a 45 is okay, but you need a 45 super, and so there's no end to it, right? There's no end to it. And it can be very confusing for any of us, and especially someone who's, I don't know, relatively new to firearms or just been into it for a few years, because it does sound logical that bigger is better, more powerful is better, and of course it is, all else being equal, right? I mean, I can't argue with that. Depending on what you're doing, if you're hunting, if it's a self-defense firearm situation, who's going to argue, well, you're really better off with a 22 short? You don't want that 10 millimeter, right? So if you knew they were going to come and get you today at noon, okay, whoever the attackers are, they were coming after you big time and armed, would you pick a 380 to fend them off? Probably not, right? A little pocket gun. Maybe you wouldn't even pick a Glock 19. I would not, as much as I like a Glock 19. You know what I would pick? I would choose a 44 Magnum or a 10 millimeter or a shotgun full of buckshot and slugs if I knew that I was going to have to defend my life today. We all would. We'd pick the biggest, most powerful thing we could possibly control, right? That just makes sense. Now, we get into the real world though. We're talking handguns. The real world where we want to have maybe a firearm handy or on our person. And this is where people in Europe and around the planet, go crazy. I see the comments, occasionally, well, but I don't live in a country where you have to have a gun. We don't have to have, okay, yeah, I understand. Be happy you're not here then, okay? We don't mind it. We like it here. But, so we're talking about a defensive situation where, as in this country, most people qualify for a carry permit. Lots of you have them I'm talking to, and you're thinking about getting them. You new gun owners, you're thinking about a carry permit. You're already in process of trying to get one. Well, all these questions hit you the hardest probably, because especially if you're going to carry the firearm, you want something that's, the reason you're carrying it is in case you ever have to defend your life, your family's life, right? Those you love. So you want it to work. It's that simple. So you go onto a forum or you see a video and someone's talking about how it's not a 45, you're basically unarmed. Why are you carrying anything less than 44 or 45? What's wrong with you? So one of my messages is, especially new people, new shooters, new gun owners, try to filter through all that and don't let it, don't get obsessed about that, about the caliber. I don't know which one's the best. I do know from the research there's not a lot of difference in standard handgun calibers and cartridges. There's not a lot of difference in terms of what it does in terms of stopping somebody that's trying to kill you, okay? I don't talk about this stuff much, but since we're talking about the caliber and why people want a bigger caliber and these issues, let's talk about it a little bit, okay? It's the kind of thing that, we sane, well, I don't know if I'm sane, but we sensible people, we civilized people, I'm fairly civilized. The last thing we ever want to do is use one of these in self-defense or against anybody, ever. I fired millions of rounds, literally. All at targets. That's all I plan to ever shoot. But you never know. Someone's trying to lob off my head or something. Guess what? I'll use it against them. So anyway, let's talk about it for a little bit. You're not going to use a handgun, and we're talking handguns, in self-defense. Let's look at this P365. You're not going to use this firearm in self-defense unless somebody is really trying to do you in, right? Great bodily harm. That's what's happening, okay? You're not going to shoot. It's just that simple. So you do want it to work when you have to use it. However, this is not the movies. It's not Hollywood. Handguns are not that powerful for you new gun owners, especially. You may not realize a rifle, or a shotgun is like 1,000 times better than any handgun because of the difference in velocity. All right. So all you're going to do, generally speaking, with a handgun is to, if you ever had to use it in defense, is to get somebody to bleeding, basically, poking holes in them. That's it, unless you hit the central nervous system, brain, spine, Again, kind of gross to talk about, but unless you hit the central nervous system, you're just talking about hopefully bleeding them out in time to stop their aggression, right? Just like if a big grizz is charging you, you're not going to bleed him out before he gets to you, okay? You've got to get a brain shot. That's what they go for, a headshot on a grizz. So that's kind of what you're dealing with. Recently, I remember, I think it was Reed Hendricks of Valor Ridge saying that you think of a handgun bullet as a drill, as a little drill bit, a long drill bit. You're just drilling holes through whatever you shoot. And again, we're talking a defensive situation, and you're just going to create a bleeding situation unless you hit the central nervous system with that little drill, right? So if you think of it that way, I think it kind of helps too. This is a 44 Magnum, and I'm going to shoot it, all right? Now, it's a really powerful firearm, but in context of what I've been saying, it's not necessarily a stopper, an automatic stopper, just because it hits somebody. It's got to hit the central nervous system, generally speaking, to stop, like that plate. Well, I missed it. Ouch. Boom. That bowling pin, let's hit that pig. That's a big gun. Has a lot of recoil, a lot of power, and you'd feel really well armed with it, right? But again, it's mainly going to set somebody to bleeding, all right? Unless you hit the central nervous system. So I say all of that mainly to just emphasize the fact that this 9mm that this shoots, much less recoil, much smaller, much lighter. You're much more likely to have it with you, and when you go to shoot it, it's going to be easier to fire, right? Boom. And very convenient, a very good bullet, but it's a lot smaller. Well, I don't have one now. Well, here's a 380, about the same. And you got a smaller situation, essentially the same base, 44. But you're drilling holes. You're not shooting a 308, a 30-06, and it's not as much different, I guess, is the bottom line, as we like to think, maybe. Okay, there's an unlimited numbers of stories where some attacker has been even hit with slugs, 44s and 45s and 4 and 5 and 8 shots and hits, and they still continue whatever they're doing. Often they're on drugs or something, but those stories abound. Okay, so you just can't rely on that. So my point is basically, I want to, I guess, kind of assuage your fears, your nervousness for not packing a 45 or a 44 or a 10mm, all right? Because there's not as much difference as we like to think there is in a real world situation.